Hello and welcome to Shaman Sister Sessions, episode 77. I'm Michelle Hawk and I'm here with my shaman sister, Katherine Bird. Together, this podcast was born out of our sisterhood, our friendship, our conversations, our questioning of what are we doing as light workers in the world? What does it all mean? And how can we delve in deeper to understand, unearth, and unfold even more? Thank you so much for joining us for our conversation today on personal mythology. We'll be delving a little bit into the role of mythology in the modern context and then looking at it through the lens of the personal connection as light workers and as the heroines and heroes of our own personal hero's journey. Thanks so much for joining us. Yay. Kat, how you doing?
I'm okay. I feel a little discombobulated at the moment, but I'm in my own little hero's journey over here.
Aren't we all?
I don't know which point in the journey I'm at yet. So,
well, we never do really. It's kind of the, we keep going and going, and then we're like, oh, that was a massive initiation cycle, or oh, that was the point in the journey where you meet the mentor, you have the epiphany. And so we'll be delving a little bit into, how do we apply how do we look at our own lives through the lens of mythology, which I think is really interesting. And then this is kind of coming off of our episode 2 weeks ago of our conversation with Holly Rhiannon. So in case you missed it, we were speaking about the codes of Avalon, and we spent the month of August looking at various facets relating to the codes of Avalon. So we had an episode on soul codes and energetic signatures. We had our guest episode with Holly Rhiannon, and now we're looking at personal mythology. So in case you missed it, it was one of my favorite episodes by far. Highly recommend.
Absolutely. It was so good. So that one's definitely, check that one out.
Yeah.
So what are we talking about here what does this mean? I know we put this one on the calendar, and at one point Michelle was like, wait, what are we talking about here? And so we've had to have some conversations around what does this really mean? What are we looking at? Because I think that we're aware of mythology out there in the world, but we're often not aware of our own sort of personal, mythology, this story that we are. We often don't realize, like you said, we don't realize what the story is. We don't realize all of the things, the components of this kind of personal mythology until maybe much later on down the road, and we start to see bits and pieces here and there, and we start to see ourselves in this way. And so we want to bring this up as a way to allow us to kind of be able to understand ourselves in a deeper way from a different perspective. So it's an exciting topic.
Absolutely. And let's take a moment to just look at mythology and the role of mythology in the historical and cultural context. We live in a modern society, especially those of us in the United States, that values linear consciousness and literal communication. So we currently associate mythology primarily with historical, traditional societies, oral tradition. There's a lot of mythologically rich communities that have existed over time, like Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, Roman mythology, all sorts of across, the African diaspora mythology and creation legends, Central American, South American mythology that is a storytelling way of exploring and explaining life and giving meaning to what we see and communicating that through metaphor, communicating that through symbolism, communicating it through stories that carry usually a deeper message at the core. And so mythology has largely fallen by the wayside in our modern context where we have a very fact, data, information-based way of communicating and delivering information. So it's an entirely different way of exploring perhaps even the same body of knowledge.
Right. But just as in when we're looking at archetypal energies, and we've done a few episodes on the archetypes and different archetypes, healer archetypes, royal archetypes, archetypes in general, working with archetypes. When we're looking and feeling into mythology, these are energies and stories that are universal, that all over the world people can identify with the point of the story, the connection to the interweaving of how humans are connected to each other, to spirit or spirits, and to the land, to animals, to the forces of nature. And often these are themes in mythology of how did things happen? How did things come about? How do we explain the unexplainable? And how do we communicate something in a way that has a richness and a rememberability, so that we're able to have culture? You know, our myths are such the backbone of the many cultures of the world. And as we're coming more into this like global, we all know each other all over the world so quickly, we're coming in contact both with all of the different cultures and their mythos, but we're almost at this point sort of having this global experience in a way that we never could before. It used to be very small areas where things were told and stories were told orally, and now we have this huge awareness of each other on this deeper level. And so we're kind of looking at how does the process of mythology, almost the structure of mythology, relate to us individually and then us collectively as a whole, as we are transitioning and transforming into new humans on a interconnected planet.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think one of the really important components of mythological communication and exploring that story aspect is multiplicity of meaning. And this is one where, you know, when we're kind of comparing and contrasting, okay, we have very linear, literal consciousness and communication, which is what we've kind of shifted into, very left brain, very fact-based, and yet, quite honestly, very little of our lives actually exists that way. We are meaning-making machines. We, you know, as much, even the most logical people in the world make decisions based on emotion, based on energetics, based on gut feelings, based on, you know, there's very little in the way of cold, hard, data-based functionality at the core of our being. We are energetic, multiple meaning, making massive associations, pattern recognition beings. And this is what we see, what is exemplified in mythology is, okay, things have multiple meanings. Things are displayed through patterns. You know, and it's easier to hear. Imagine when you're listening to a story, you can notice, oh, this thing came up here and this character appeared here and here and here. They're probably going to be important later. Or this thing seems isolated, but actually remember when this thing happened, and oh, we find out they're connected. So it's almost like an invitation to remember what it's like to listen to a story, particularly of mythological origin, where there's a heck of a lot of metaphor going on. Everything is important. Everything has meaning. And, you know, knowing that this for thousands and thousands of years was the primary method of communication and historical and cultural record keeping, it boggles my mind a little bit that we've shifted into this primarily data-based assumption of reality that actually has no bearing on our very human roots.
Right. But we're still obsessed with it, honestly, because we have this huge movie industry that is our current, you know, who's making the myths now. and we have entertainers, and even our obsession with things like the royals and celebrities. They're sort of almost like our current myth makers in a lot of ways. And so we can't stop ourselves as humans for being interested in this. And the thing is that there's so many of these myths and stories and ways of communicating that were and still are giving us an internal, like you said, that emotional hook into understanding things that are of this broader meaning, of a broader spiritual meaning, of a greater understanding of the inner workings of a human, and this wheel of life that we're on, this journey that we're all taking. And the more that we have a connection to understanding those things, the more we have a connection to understanding ourselves in the end. And a lot of the spiritual traditions all over the planet they're based on what we would call now myths, not what they would call, a lot of times it wouldn't be like, oh, this is a story. You'd be like, no, this is how it happened. This is when the way that it happened. And even though it would seem fantastical to us now, and we'd say, obviously, from my logical mind, that never could have happened that way because animals don't do that, or, angels don't do that, or people don't do that. But yet there's a certain mystery in a lot of ways that we've lost. We're kind of in this modern day, like we know how the magician pulls the rabbit out of the hat. So we're constantly trying to figure it out and understand what's underneath it and make it really logical.
And almost that dismissal of something that defies logic or that presents an alternative view of reality. And so when we're looking at applying this to the personal experience, okay, so, we have kind of this like modern interpretation, linear, literal reality, and we have the mythological interpretation where everything matters, everything has meaning, we can notice patterns, we can tell important characters based on how and when they show up. And there's almost this invitation to what would it be like to actually look at the narrative of your own personal hero's journey or heroine's journey and treat your life as its own myth, its own mythos, with the characters that appear and the patterns that come up again and again, and the cycles of initiation that you as the own personal hero of your story go through and come out the other side with battle scars and lessons and new tools and new skills. Right.
And the other thing that we see in these myths is that there's magic. There's anything is possible in these stories. Anything could happen. The craziest thing will go down, and it's like, oh yeah, that's just what's happening right now. That's there. And what I've seen so often in people who are having this awakening experience, and they're realizing the larger awarenesses of their spirituality, and they're turning on their intuitive gifts and these different things that come along with what it means to awaken. It's like this is what starts to show up. Is all of a sudden, I'll get texts from people who are clients, and they're like, oh my gosh, the synchronicity of this, and then this animal showed up, and then it's all of a sudden you see people's lives start to express a level of magic and possibility that either was happening before and they just weren't aware of it, or is completely brand new and they're just blowing their minds over and over again over the fact that these things are showing up. And they're just, like you said, these characters that are coming, like, oh my gosh, well, why is this particular bird showing up again and again and again in my life right now? So often when we're looking at things from that logical perspective, we can say, well, yeah, that's just a whatever. That doesn't mean anything. but we're always making meaning. So when we start to see the magic, we're like, okay, well, what does it mean? Then we get to ask those questions like, all right, well, this is what's showing up again and again. What's it about? Why is it showing up for me?
Mm-hmm. And looking at that, if this were to happen in a story that someone was telling you, or if you're reading a myth or whatever, and you notice, okay, this bird, to use that example, this particular bird keeps coming up again and again and again, you can bet that there is some sort of lesson or guidance or information or something associated with that, because things don't show up repeatedly without reason. And so I think one of the reasons that we're delving into this topic, knowing that yes, there's some aspects of mythology that we touched upon during the Codes of Avalon episode, especially, but noticing what happens when we treat our lives like that. Like, how does that shift our attitude and our mentality and how we're showing up for our own personal stories?
Mm-hmm.
Stories in the good way, not in the
right.
I make stories way. No, but like our own personal mythos, and treating, the hero's journey. Let's talk about that a little more. We've referenced it a couple times now as one of the most well-known offerings, I get, or like interpretations.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's said that every single journey, every single story that's ever been written is the hero's journey. Mm-hmm. And so everybody knows what it is, even if they haven't put that name to it.
Right. And this was Joseph Campbell originally who kind of coined that term. And he got that, or he came to that conclusion from studying the mythology across the board throughout human history and noticing, wow, all of these stories have these things in common. They have, kind of the hero at home, the uninitiated hero. And then there is some sort of leaving where they have to go on a quest, and then they have the initiation, and then they meet the teacher, and then they have the dark night of the soul, and then they have the catharsis, and then they return home. They have the homecoming once again, but having gone full circle. And I paraphrased massively in that.
Right.
More involved. But then they come back full circle to relate the story. And that is always the final completing point of the hero's journey, where the hero returns home and relates, here's what happened. So this whole thing actually ends with the telling of the mythos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just like you're saying, this like linear, logical way of looking at things, like somehow we have, in our desire, I think, in some ways, to kind of remove ourselves from nature and remove ourselves from the less educated version of humanity that we're trying to evolve out of, that we've tried to kind of pull ourselves out of the myth, right? We're pulling ourselves over here, and that somehow our lives are going to not have this. And I was like, there are a lot of people, and I'm sure that you know some of them, or they're in your families, or they're in your towns, but there are a lot of people where the focus of life is to have as little happen as possible, as little change as possible, to go to work, to stay on a job, to, have a family, but really come home, maybe go on a vacation once a year. Like, there's very, very little change, and change is upsetting. Change is not encouraged. Like, as if we can stay as calm and just nothing really going on as possible, and just live some sort of life where there's very little going on, then that will equate some sort of happiness and success. And yet that's not fulfilling this very human, it coded into us, coded into who we are, that we are connected to this process of going through this hero's journey.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So then what experiences are we denying ourselves, perhaps, from that fear of change, or from that desire to not put ourselves in danger, or not knowing, okay, well, if I take that step, who am I going to become?
Mm-hmm.
One of the other ways that shifts when we start to view our lives through the lens of our personal mythology. Well, if I were the hero in this story, the hero would take up this path. The hero knows that this is kind of an inevitable step on the journey. You know, it would be a really boring myth if the hero's like, nope, I'm out, right? Like those are not the myths that we are naturally drawn to. That's not what we naturally gravitate to or want to hear. And that would be the most boring movie in the world of like Frodo stays home. Peace out.
He planted some turnips and
Yeah.
that's it, right?
Right. But so we are drawn to, because we relate to, what is it like to step into the unknown? What is it like to call upon all that which we have amassed, like our knowledge and our tools and our community and our connections? And what is it like to put on the mantle and step out the door, not knowing where we're headed? And that speaks to a very, I want to say primal. I don't know if that's exactly the right word, but that very like primal instinct of that quest of the myth of ourselves as the personal heroes in our own mythology. And whatever our quest is, you know, it doesn't have to be, okay, destroy the ring and bring peace to the earth. No, it could be perhaps your quest is, you know, going out and doing the thing that you love, or your quest is making peace with your family members, or your quest is, you know, going to school, or your quest is whatever the thing is, or building a tiny house. And yet, I don't know, I'm just coming up with stuff here, but whatever that personal myth becomes for you is noticing, what is it fulfilling for you? What rites of initiation is it taking you through? How are you using your tools and then coming back home, returning home and having a new story to tell?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And, you know, we can also look at this in terms of, so for a lot of people who tune in, maybe you read tarot, and you can look at your tarot deck and see that Fool, right, is like right up the first thing he does is just like, oh, I'm just gonna, here I go. And I've got the little dog and I'm walking off the cliff. And you see, as you look through that major arcana, like you see this journey that unfolds, and there's stuff that is like, wow, that was super intense, and the tower and everything's falling apart, and oh, there's these new initiations of becoming these new characters in my life that I get to embody more than one thing. As I'm going through this journey, I don't have to stay the same. I can reinvent myself. I can choose to take on a new mantle and put on a new identity and approach the world from a new point of view. And we're not taught that that's even possible. Generally, we're taught like, okay, go to school, choose the thing, study that for 4, 8, 12 years, go and do the thing for 20, 40, 60 years. But the truth is that we can evolve so quickly in this lifetime and become so many things, gathering so many different stories and experiences, and then bringing those to the world so that other people can understand like what happens inside the human experience as it goes through a personal evolutionary tale of just one lifetime.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Wonderful. So as we're looking at this and thinking like, okay, how do I start to apply that in my experience? Let's look at some of the ways that we can begin to pick apart and looking at the different aspects of personal mythology. I think it also feels important to include, you know, actually looking at and studying and integrating the current existing mythology that we have access to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And looking at also your own personal story, your own personal mythology, like looking at where your peeps come from. And I know in America, a lot of us are very disconnected from that and from in, you know, our lineages and our sort of tribe. And so there's that genetic portion of, okay, where are my people from and what were they thinking? What were the stories they were telling? And then what are the cultures or the practices that I am most drawn to, that are interesting to me, that I feel lit up by, that when I see the images of, like, it gives me a feeling inside of my body, or I listen to the music, I get a feeling inside my body that's really strong. What are those stories? Like, we get to, in some ways, we're building in our own personal mythology, and some of that is like you're saying, it's like born on the backs of what came before. And having an understanding of, like, what's your flavor? What is it that you are resonating with? And then studying that to see where it's showing up in your life in some kind of way.
Mm-hmm. So in case you missed the soul codes and energetic signatures episode that we did a few weeks ago, this would probably give a lot of context into what we're talking about now, knowing that we carry the soul codes and the energetic signatures not only of our genetic lineages and our genetic ancestors, but of our energetic lineages and ancestors as well. So those are kind of the two pieces that we're talking about here, looking to understand and gain some insight into the mythologies of both of those groups. So, okay, looking to where is your predominant ancestry from, or do you relate really, really strongly to a, if you're like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of an example. Like I'm 1/8 Irish, right? And I have stuff that I'm more of, and yet resonating really strongly with Irish mythology and mythos and this like druidic aspect of that mythology. That's something that really calls to me, and I have the physical root for it, and I'm pretty sure I also have an energetic root for that. And so looking to, okay, how does that show up in my lived experience? Are there themes? Are there characters? Are there symbols? Are there rites of initiation? Are there any indicators of these codes of mythology that I am carrying in my field and that show up in my own personal mythology? And how can knowing these stories, knowing this mythos, explain and contribute to and enhance my lived experience and empower me to move forward with more information?
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And then from there, what does it look like in your life? Mm-hmm. And what is this story that's being told? And going back and doing some writing and some meditation on your own personal story and things that have happened in your life that are these points of radical change and transformation, and are these moments where the teacher stepped in or something shifted that was significant. And what is the transformation that's been occurring? This is very helpful, especially as you are, both Michelle and I work a lot with mentoring healers and people who are, offering different kinds of spiritual gifts. And it's very important to understand your own story and to be able to tell it, and in order for other people to understand you and to understand what it is that you're doing, right? What your gifts are and what your offerings are in the world. And a lot of times, by going through and looking very deeply at the stories that have happened in your life and the things that you've overcome and the transformations that have occurred, this gives us an enormous amount of information as to what the heck it is you're here to do and why you're doing it and how you communicate it and how you get other people to get on board for your thing, whatever that thing is. It's extremely helpful. I think Michelle's kind of cutting out. I don't know if you're cutting out on my end or you're in. It's okay.
I don't know. I heard you glitching out, so I hope everybody caught that. Go ahead and chat into the chat box if there was anything you want us to repeat. But looking at, I love that you're referencing, okay, what are the gifts and what are the tools that I'm going to shed a little more light on that. What are the gifts and the tools that we take from these points in the hero's journey, that we take from our mythology, right? So let's think about, when I'm just have like all the Lord of the Rings metaphors coming up today. So like when Frodo goes and the elves are helping him, and then he has like the vial of the light that he shines at the spider, or is that Bilbo? Either one. Somewhere in that like Lord of the Rings thing. But there are these tokens, right? But so he has got like the vial of light that he shines at the spider. I'm pretty sure that's The Hobbit, not Lord of the Rings. My bad. And then, they have the ring, and they have the staff, and they have the companions on the journey, right? So there are all these things that keep coming to add. And it's like the magic toolkit, right? And so it's, as the hero is on the journey, they have people coming to support them. They have magic totems. They have tokens that they win, or trophies that they win, or tools that kind people give them. So same thing in your personal mythology. Who do you have as part of your quest? Where's your Samwise Gamgee at your side? Where's your vial of light from the elves? And so looking at all of these components of character, and these components of like the tools and tokens of the journey, looking at, okay, who is in your community? Who are the light workers by your sides? Who are, and I think Kat and I are a really good example of that, of like, okay, on our quest, we have found each other as, okay, shaman sister, awesome, ready, go. So like we're walking on this path in this quest individually and collectively together. And I guarantee you in your life, you have people like that too. And then the tokens of your tools, your discoveries, your knowledge, you solve the riddle and then you get the key, right? So what riddle did you solve in your personal mythology, and what was the key that was given to you that has enabled you to go unlock the door? And really starting to look at everything through that lens. It's fun. It's cooler than looking at, like just
here's all the crap that's gone wrong in my life. It's like, no, these were my trials on my quest to, become the most powerful wizard in the land.
Naturally, yeah, and to destroy the ring, and or whatever the myth is, or there are so many. So looking at and again, in the codes of Avalon, we were looking at specifically Avalon mythology. So like the King Arthur, the Knights of the Round Table, the Lady of the Lake, legends around, what's his name? Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and all these other pieces around that. And there is so much richness there. And then looking to the mythology, you look at what are the values of the community. You can tell that based on what are the myths that come out of it. So looking to your own personal mythology, what are the values that you're living? If you look at your life, you look at your choices, and you see, oh, okay, well, the hero really consistently is choosing to go rush into danger to save the damsel in distress. Like, okay, look at, do I have a thing where I need to go save people, or I sacrifice myself and my personal health and well-being in order to support people? Right? We can look at the values, or look at our personal mythology in order to discern what are the values and the choices that I'm consistently making to support those values.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we also get to play with, what does it look like to write a new story? And what does it look like if I was the hero in this story and not just like the victim or the person that's just sort of flopping about, letting life happen and just seeing what's going to come up? But what is a more active role that I can take in this experience of, if I was the hero, if I was the wizard, if I was this character in this story, what would it look like? And how can I write that into being? How can I write what that next piece is? And I think it also gives us access to an ability to say yes when we want to be comfortable. Like, oh, actually, maybe if I did the thing that was less comfortable and more challenging, it would be a much more interesting story. So maybe that's what I'm going to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And knowing that, again, it's the difference between Frodo sitting at home and watching TV and Frodo taking up the ring to go throw it in the fires of Mordor.
And, there's lots of,
So you choose which Frodo you want to be.
Yeah, you get to choose which Frodo you want to be. And there's lots of Frodos home watching TV. Like, there's a whole village. There's a whole village of, like, they're never going to leave. They're just going to hang out and, like, eat the turnips. And that's also okay. We get to also look at, like, oh, maybe this is the way my life is. But, but they're doing this thing over here. And I don't need to actually judge that, because that's an important part of the story. An important part of the story is that most of the village stays home, and that there's the one weirdo who's like, all right, I'm putting on the magic cloak and I am hitting the road, even though I have no idea what's going to happen. And, grave and peril, danger happening all around me. And it's okay if what you're doing or what you're experiencing or what you have experienced seems remarkably different or more dramatic than the average, mouse in the village. And neither one is right. It's just that some of us are the hero and some of us are the innkeeper who is there just to keep the inn and be the way station for the hero to show up for. And that's important too.
And the innkeeper is the hero of their own personal hero's journey. And so then looking at, okay, if one helpful thing to consider as we're looking at the like the archetypal representation and all the different characters is looking at a myth and knowing, it's easier to start outside of the self, but knowing, okay, I am every component in this mythos. I am the hero. I am the innkeeper. I am the wizard. I am the crone. I am the spider. I am the dwarves. And how are those different parts of me playing out in my own personal experience? And how am I drawing to me the people to reflect that in my life? So it can be a little bit of a, kind of playing that game of looking at, I was having a conversation with a client last week, actually, where she was sharing an incredible amount of frustration at a very destructive pattern that's been showing up in her life. And it's almost this, looking at how can this keep happening? How is this still a thing? And almost this like frustration and anger and like, I don't know what to do. And so one of the things that we talked about was looking at, okay, if we are every component of a story, and this is something that people do in dream analysis too, of like, okay, you are yourself and you are the demons and you are all the things. So looking at, okay, in this context, you are yourself and you are also these challenges and you are also these people who are showing up to confront this for you. And you are also the perpetrator of this pattern, and you are also the bystander, and you are the witness, and all of these pieces. And picking out, okay, how do these different parts of myself show up to play out in the mythos that I am creating? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I think so. Does that make sense, people?
Let us know.
Yeah, because then we get to have this empowered existence of life. And instead of the story is happening, to me in some ways, it's like, oh, no, actually I'm participating in this story. And isn't it interesting that this character keeps showing up again and again? A lot of times we'll have an experience where we'll have this particular kind of person who shows up as a teacher in our life in some way. Maybe we keep finding the same romantic partner or the same like business partner or whatever it is. We keep having the same experience over and over. And in some ways we might just look at that and go, wow, there's a lot of those kinds of people in the world. But what is it there more deeply? If this was a story and you kept seeing a wolf show up throughout the story, if the wolf kept showing up again and again and again and again, what is it they're telling you? And what is it, the deeper meaning that you can take away from having these experiences, not from that I'm in it personal, angsty, this is so messed up that someone would treat me this way, or that someone would behave this way in my life. But okay, well, if I am the hero in this story, what is this character who keeps showing up? What's the deeper meaning? What's the lesson there? What's the tool? What's the amulet that I am supposed to gain from this experience in order to move forward to become more empowered at some point?
Mm-hmm. Awesome. I love it. So with this, looking at, okay, hopefully now you've got some good ideas about how you can start looking at your own experience. Maybe we can leave you with a few journal prompts or ideas to really specifically dig in there before we look at, okay, how does this impact our experience as a whole, kind of our community experience? I think one of the pieces I'd like to invite, again, just to name, is looking at all the different parts of the story. And maybe this isn't the first, actually, I don't think this is the first one, but this is looking at the different, actually, maybe the first one would just be start naming characters. Start noticing who are the characters who show up continually in my life. And whether that's as individual people or whether it's as this type of person, that you can give a name to the archetype of that character who shows up. And that's usually a really good way just to start noticing what are the kinds of people, who are the people who we have consistently in the myth who show up either as teachers or antagonists or allies or guides of some sort, or as support.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So number one.
So is that the first one?
Do you have something that should go before that?
No, I don't know. You confused me with what's the second one?
Well, the one that I was going to say was like, okay, you are every part of your hero's journey, but I feel like that one goes at the end, or like
okay.
The end.
Okay, so the first one is the list of characters, who's showing up in your life, and also I think, I don't know, maybe before that is sort of the story. Right? This is a little bit of my life story. You don't have to write all the details, but a little bit of that autobiography of this is what my life has been like so far. This is, if I was going to tell this in story form, this is what it would be, and kind of doing some writing around that.
Mm-hmm.
And then picking out the characters.
Picking out the characters and picking out the points of initiation, mm-hmm. or the challenges, right? So like, when is the hero going into a challenge?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then the lessons that came out of that challenge. So like, what was the challenge going in? How were they supported? Like, were their characters showing up to support them? And what was the token that they took away?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Or you took away.
Right. Mm-hmm. And is there one more before looking at how you are all the characters?
Write the story. Look at the characters. Track the initiation points and the lessons and the takeaways. Mm-hmm. I would also make a list of the characters and then maybe give them job descriptions or group them archetypally. So say like, okay, these are the teachers that I have, mm-hmm. and these are the supporters that I have had, and these are the moments where I've had antagonists show up, or enemies, or however you want to see it, and track them in your story. And if you want to make like a flow chart of this, or you want to make a visual representation and see, okay, during this type of initiatory experience, an antagonist showed up, and then I had a guide to support me through it, and then I had a support as I was recovering, and then I had, the dog's coming out. Dog time. This is my intern. Puppy intern. Say hello. She's the cutest intern. Tracking where in the story do the characters appear and what is their job? Because we all have this, right? Where at certain points in our lives, people step forward and it's almost like they're there for a reason and a season, and then they step back. And then as we're in a different cycle, someone else steps forward. And sometimes it can be the same person, but sometimes not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then look at how the characters are all you.
How all the characters and the challenges and the initiations and the totems are all you. And take inventory. I would say maybe this is the last one, but actually look at, if you treat every challenge that you have undertaken as, okay, here's an amulet that I extracted, look in your bag and see, like, what are the amulets that you have, so take review on what are the lessons that I have gained from these initiation cycles and how are they showing up? Am I utilizing them? Have I had this magic token in my backpack the entire time and I haven't freaking used it because I haven't even known that it was there or known that it was a thing, right? I mean, we all know, like, Dorothy had the shoes the whole time and she just didn't know.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's a really good, actually, the whole Wizard of Oz one, that's a really good one to look at because it very much shows super clear as day the hero's journey and the different characters that come in and what their representations are. And so if we can start to see the people in our lives are those, a little bit more of a, like, almost cartoonify them and go, oh, okay, that's what you're representing at that point. I thought you were just a jerk, but you actually had a very real purpose, and you're this energy that was coming in. So you're the witch. Great, got it. I'm driving my house on you. Anyways, so what was next? Oh, the societal implications. Are we ready for that?
Sure. Okay. So what happens when we start doing this? I think one of the pieces that you actually just mentioned is really important, is it makes it easier for us to treat the people who show up to fulfill that role in our life with a little more compassion and grace of, like, okay, for me, you're fulfilling a very particular purpose. If you are highlighting XYZ to me, you might be a jerk, but you're also the villain in my own personal mythology. And I am here to interact with you in such a way as to come out of this with an amulet.
Yeah.
For example.
And it also lets you have more patience for yourself and understanding as you're going through these initiations and these different processes in life. A lot of times we bemoan when we're not having an easy time, or we're like, everything's gone into chaos in my life and I must be doing something wrong, or I'm not manifesting right, or I'm not doing my affirmations enough, or we start blaming ourselves because we're having a hard time. And really that hard time is this amazing part of the story, where it's the most interesting part of the story that we want to, we don't go to movies where there isn't something exciting that happens at some point. We'll turn the movie off and it's like, nothing has happened in this whole movie. I don't even know what's going on. So we can kind of have patience of, like, and take a step back and be able to witness, wow, everything's really challenging right now, and I'm having to make some big changes, and everything's kind of going crazy, and all the things that are the things that seem like bad things maybe are happening, but okay, this must be one of those moments when I'm going through this initiation that will lead me to this new transformation.
This is the moment in your own personal movie where everyone's sitting on the edge of their seats wondering, how's it going to happen? Like, what are they going to do? Right. And so treating it like that, I think also it's inevitable whenever we actually do life review that we have a holy shit moment of, like, wow, I accomplished. Usually one of the holy shit moments is I have actually accomplished way more than I thought I had. Or looking at, I have this experience, I do sort of like twice a year life review a little bit. So like around my birthday and around the winter solstice, and just look at, like, okay, how have I gone in the last 6 months and a year and stuff. And inevitably there's this sort of, in the moment I feel nothing changed and I'm still the same and I didn't get all these things done that I wanted to. And then I actually look, I'm like, oh my gosh, this year has been ridiculous.
Right.
And so, looking at, if we were to plot out, okay, personal hero's journey of life, that's a lot of life. And if not, have you been saying no to a lot of quests or invitations to go out the door with a ring? And that's that's an important piece too, of owning how much have I been an active participant in my personal mythology.
Right. And getting to be real with ourselves over that. And okay, have I really been showing up and taking on the challenges, or have I been, I don't know. And like you said, we often discount what we have done. Just the other day I was on the phone with my mom and she was like, "You have had such an exciting life." And I was like, "Meh." And then, so she starts listing all the things that I've done in my life, and I'm like, yeah, I guess that sounds pretty good.
Right. So looking at that, treating ourselves with more patience and treating ourselves with, also one of the things that I think is inevitably super helpful when we look at this, there is an element of pattern recognition, where when you're in the story, it's often a little harder to discern. But imagine if you're watching a movie or hearing a story of a hero on their journey, or someone in this mythological experience, and they keep coming up against the same kind of experience, and they keep either not getting it or it keeps happening, and you're just like, oh my God, it's this thing, you just need this one thing, or just have this one piece be different. And when we actually kind of take a step back and look at the mythos of the personal mythos as a whole, it's a whole lot easier to spot, oh, okay, pattern, 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 pattern. This is the one thing that I need. Whereas when we're in it, it might just seem like, oh, here's like a thing that's happening in my life. Mm-hmm.
Yep, exactly. And as we do this, we get to have new myths, that we're creating new myths, that we are the myth makers and we are the heroes in those myths. And we get to create new stories out there and tell new stories and vision new stories into being, that we get to evolve the myths that in the past they were centered around certain ideas that needed to be expressed or needed to be understood or needed to be explored in some kind of way. And now we get to create new stories and new myths and supercharge that energy out into the collective, into the planet, so that more people can start to live these new stories and these new myths of creation that we're part of making.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And just to give a couple of ideas of some sort, I know we've been talking about the hero's journey, and this shows up and expresses in different sorts of ways. So it might be helpful, I want to plant a couple seeds here, to look at your life, your personal mythology, through the lens of the creation myth. So look at what creation stories exist through the lens of the becoming myth. So, there's a sort of either a naming or a rite of passage or initiation of some sort. So creation, becoming, and through the achievement myth of some sort of grand quest that has been unlocked, etc. But we usually have, some, and of course there are other categories, but those are, I think, some of the most common ones of how was this made? How did this person come into the expression of who they are, and what did they achieve? And so maybe keeping those three things in mind of well, what have I created? How am I the creator? How are my own creation myths showing up? How are my actualization myths showing up in my life? And how is my achievement coming through?
Yeah. And like I said before, if you can connect to those aspects of yourself, and you can bring those stories to the world and you can tell them in an engaging way, then people will be able to connect to you on a deeper level, so that they can understand you, they understand their connection to you, and then you're building community, you're building tribe, and you're inspiring others.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for joining us. I think we're about ready to wrap right now. And if you are interested, again, I know we referenced particularly our last two episodes, the Soul Codes and Energetic Signatures, and the Codes of Avalon featuring Holly Rhiannon. In case you missed them, the Codes of Avalon with Holly was one of my favorites, and the Soul Codes is super applicable to everything we talked about today. Mm-hmm. So those episodes and all our past episodes you can find on our YouTube channel, on iTunes, and on Stitcher under Shaman Sister Sessions. you can go ahead and contact us through our Facebook page, through our website, or via email, shamansistersessions@gmail.com. And of course, this podcast is our offering to you, and yet there are a lot of behind the scenes fees that we need to cover in order to keep producing free material. So if this has resonated with you, and if you feel called to support us, we would really love to receive that from you. Even $1 per month is helpful, and you can do this through our Patreon account, patreon.com/Shaman Sister Sessions. That's patreon.com/Shaman Sister Sessions. Again, even $1 per month is helpful. If this has resonated with you, if you have found this helpful, this is our 77th episode. We have, over 80 hours worth of free material for you. So please do share the support so that we can keep doing this, because we love to.
Yep. And so subscribe to our YouTube channel or whatever those things are. Hit the subscribe and you'll get notifications, and share. If you found anything in any of our videos or any of our episodes helpful or inspiring to you, sharing them via social media or to your tribe is highly recommended. Let's see, updates. If you are in the Southern California area, then I have a staff Qigong course upcoming in September and October. And we are going to be going through the 5 organ systems. We're going to be completely rewiring ourselves with a big wooden staff. It's very active, and it's going to be incredible and amazing and so much fun. And then open your channel. Open Your Channel is going to be next. So my channeling course and the channeling retreat is happening this fall. So if you are interested in learning how to open your channel and to stabilize it and to maximize the results, become more precise, then this is the course for you. So reach out about that.
Beautiful. And I was going to say, in terms of sharing material, if there is an episode in particular that you do feel called to share, either through your list or to your tribe or whoever would be supportive to you, please go ahead and reach out and ask. It'll be a yes, and just go ahead and say where you got it from and share it back to us. So we want, in creating this content, we want it to be available for you to offer to your tribe as well. Update on my end, I am closing applications tomorrow. So this is tomorrow, which is August 29th, for my I Am Medicine Spiritual Mentorship Fall cohort. So 6 months of working with me on delving into your personal practice to support self-actualization, self-mastery, and your energetic process, delving into your personal soul codes and energetic signatures to align with your highest self, delving into your initiation experiences, your trainings, and putting it into the context of your own sacred path, and giving you functional, tangible action steps to go out in the world and to live your sacred mission. If that appeals to you, contact me as soon as possible. I have space for one more person, and applications close tomorrow. So that will be the only way to work with me through the end of this year. If that calls to you, Michelle@joyofenergy.com. Let me know ASAP. And thank you so much for joining us. It is a pleasure, as always, to share this with you. And we will see you next week, regular time, Tuesday, 1 p.m. Thank you.
Bye, Michelle.